Hello students, Professor Franz here. Today we will talk about negative externalities from production. A negative externality from production occurs when producing a good or a service creates cost to bystanders, people who are not directly involved in the market transaction. For example, factories may cause air pollution. The factory and its consumers benefit from production, but nearby residents bear the cost of poor air quality. Another example is noise pollution from airports. Air travel benefits passengers and airlines, but people living near airports endure noise that they are not compensated for. Because the external costs are ignored by producers, markets tend to overproduce goods and services that generate negative externalities from production. When we talk about negative externalities from production, it's important to distinguish between the private supply curve and the social supply curve. The private supply curve reflects the costs faced by producers only, such as labor and capital. This is the supply curve we normally see in a free market. However, when production creates negative externalities like pollution, there are additional costs imposed on bystanders. The social supply curve includes both the private costs of production and these external costs. As a result, the social supply curve lies above the private supply curve. Here is the private supply curve SP, which reflects the cost of production, such as the cost of labor and capital, to the producer. Adding the external cost to bystanders, we get the social supply curve SS. Because the bystanders suffer from the production, the social supply curve sits above the private supply curve, reflecting those additional costs. Now we add the demand curve. When considering how much to produce, the firm looks at their private supply curve SP. Why? Because producers ignore external costs to bystanders. If we let the market be, then the equilibrium quantity will be the intersection of the private supply curve SP and the demand curve, resulting in quantity QE, where E stands for equilibrium. But what is the socially optimal quantity? It can be found at the intersection of the social supply curve SS and the demand curve. The socially optimal quantity is QO, where O stands for optimum. Why do we look at the social supply curve SS to find the socially optimal quantity? Because the social supply curve incorporates both the cost to the producer and the extra cost to bystanders. Therefore, the social supply curve reflects the total cost to the entire society, which is higher than the private supply curve due to external costs ignored by the producer. As our equilibrium quantity is greater than the optimal quantity, deadweight loss occurs. The shaded triangle is the deadweight loss. Recall from the chapter of market efficiency, where deadweight loss occurs with overproduction. This is exactly what happens with negative externality from production. Here is the challenge again. We see two triangles. So which one is the deadweight loss? We use the same tip as before. We will focus on the social supply curve because it reflects the cost to the entire society. We will erase the private supply curve. Once we erase the private supply curve, you see only one triangle. That is the deadweight loss. What can we do to reduce the deadweight loss? If we could shift the private supply curve SP to the left, where it coincides with the social supply curve, we can get rid of the deadweight loss. To reduce the deadweight loss caused by pollution, governments can use several policy tools. One option is to tax polluters. A pollution tax forces firms to account for external costs they impose on the society, encouraging them to reduce emissions. Another approach is to auction pollution rights, also known as cap and trade, which limits total pollution while allowing firms to buy and sell permits. Firms that can reduce pollution at a lower cost can sell their permits for a profit, encouraging greener production methods. So you might be wondering, when does the market overproduce and when does it underproduce? You don't need to memorize this, just use your intuition. This slide summarizes how externalities affect market outcomes. With a passive externality from consumption, consumers ignore external benefits and consume too little, so QE is less than QO. With a negative externality from consumption, consumers ignore external costs and consume too much, so QO is less than QE. With a negative externality from production, producers ignore external costs and produce too much, and therefore QO is less than QE. The key idea is that positive externalities lead to too little output, while negative externalities lead to too much. Think of a market failure like a broken oven. If the oven is broken, every pie you bake comes out burned. You wouldn't keep baking. You would call a technician to fix the oven. In economics, when markets don't work properly, we get deadweight loss. Economic policies are the tools we use to fix the oven, so the market pie, total surplus, is maximized again. Interestingly, ideas about externalities were discussed thousands of years ago by philosophers. Confucius taught, "Don't do to others what you do not want done to yourself," which reflects the idea of reducing negative externalities. Jesus said, "So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets," encouraging actions that create positive externalities. In their own way, both were emphasizing outcomes that would improve overall well-being, what economists today would call efficiency. This concludes our lecture. I hope you found it helpful, and I will see you next time.